Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to the final session of our special webinar series, The Crisis in Intelligence Policy Relations, Intelligence Function in the Age of Populism and Democratic Backsliding. My name is Ofer Krima, and I'm the coordinator of the Israeli Forum for Intelligence Studies, also known as IFIS. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I will say a few words about IFIS. IFIS was established over 2 years ago as the initiative of the Institute for the Research of the Methodology of Intelligence within the Israeli Intelligence Heritage and Commemoration Center in Herzliya. And today it also operates with the support of the Leonard Davis Institute for International Relations at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. So this is also an opportunity to thank both organizations for backing and supporting this initiative, and especially this webinar series. IFIS was established to promote the research and education on intelligence in Israeli academia. What we do is primarily we provide a platform for exchanges among Israeli scholars of intelligence and among themselves and international groups and scholars of intelligence. So we do monthly meetings usually. Some of them are like this one, are virtual, and usually they take place in English. And we also have in-person meetings, usually in Hebrew, except for our annual conference, which I would like to say a few brief words about it, because we have only 4 days left for the final deadline on May 31st. We will have our second annual conference in intelligence studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem at the end of October. So we set an earlier deadline for, especially for international participants, to allow for more time to prepare and purchase tickets. So right after that, we will try to give you an indication whether you were accepted or not accepted. And later on, after the final deadline on July 31st, we will issue the full program. So you can scan the QR code, and this will lead you directly to the call for papers, and I should say awards nominations. So we accept nominations of excellent works on intelligence, either from Israeli-based scholars or from anyone who's studying some aspects of Israeli intelligence. So this is about the conference. Now, the reason for the webinar series is of course the failure on October 7th that put a lot of strain on the relationship between the intelligence and policymakers in Israel. While the government is still preventing the establishment of a national commission of inquiry, the public remains exposed to a barrage of mudslings and engineered leaks that speak to the overall lack of trust, learning, and reform here in Israel. This reached a boiling point in the last few weeks when the government wished to dismiss head of the internal security agency, the Shin Bet, and encountered resistance from both its director, Ronen Bar, himself, and civil society. In the most recent development, the Supreme Court ruled that the dismissal was unlawful. President of the court, Isaac Amit, wrote that the decision to fire Bar points to a neglect, quote, a neglect of basic concepts concerning the Shin Bet and the position of the head of the Shin Bet as an apolitical and independent state official who owes first and foremost a duty of loyalty to the public, end of quote. In a flagrant defiance of the court, Netanyahu announced that he will try to get through the process his chosen nominee for the job, an IDF officer with ties to Netanyahu's inner circles and with no record in intelligence or law enforcement. But while Israel is in many ways a unique case, and the colossal failure on October 7 obviously is a singular event, it is also not that unique. Intelligence policy relations are undergoing upheavals around the democratic world in an age of populism, which some view as a driving force of democratic backsliding, while others see it as a corrective force seeking to reform power structures. As the central forum for intelligence scholars here in Israel and as part of the global academic community of students of intelligence, we felt compelled to address this pressing issue. Therefore, we put together this series that explores this phenomenon from various angles and puts it in a wider perspective. So not just intelligence, but civil service, and not just Israel, but also other countries, as we saw in last week's session. Our session today will touch upon the question that hovered over our previous sessions: how should civil servants, and intelligence officers included, confront the challenges of populism's disregard for expertise and democratic backsliding? Our keynote speaker today is Professor Michael Bauer, the chair in public administration at the Florence School of Transnational Governance at the European University Institute. His academic career includes positions as a senior fellow at the Max Planck Institute for Research on Collective Goods in Bonn and professorships at the University of Konstanz and Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin. Professor Bauer's research focuses on European and international public administration, multi-level governance, and democratic bureaucracy. Recently, he has explored the impact of populist government on public administration systems and the ethical responsibilities of civil servants under illiberal rule. In this regard, his most recent book is titled Democratic Backsliding in Public Administration: How Populists in Government Transform State Bureaucracy, Cambridge University Press. Professor Bauer, we are very happy to have you. You have 30 minutes, after which we will have time for Q&A as usual. And since it's our last session, the last session of our series, we will try to hold a closed discussion afterwards in Hebrew for IFIS members only. So please, members of the forum, stay a little longer, and the rest we will kindly ask you to to exit the meeting after we conclude the discussion. Professor Bauer, I will now hand it over to you. There we
Thank
go.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Ofek. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to present. And I have to admit I was a bit selfish when I accepted the invitation, because I thought this is a good opportunity also for me to present some of my present kind of work that is maybe unfinished. No, that is certainly that is unfinished, and therefore kind of collect some of what you think about it. That means, however, also I'm not intelligence kind of expert, so you will hear a lot about public administration theories and about how to react maybe to illiberal government. But the disclaimer is a bit that I'm not sure what I really can offer here. You will tell me then afterwards. And I should also disclaim in a way that there is, of course, a long tradition of scholars that have been working on ethics for bureaucrats. So I myself have to say I'm standing on this work, and there's a lot of it. So we reinterpret a bit what has been going on in the light now of current events, obviously. So after this disclaimer, I want to present you two kind of strands. You will afterwards tell me whether this worked out or whether this is too much. But I want to first, in the first part, kind of tackle a bit the idea or the kind of question whether bureaucratic guardianship under illiberal rule is possible at all, given our concepts of public administration and of obedience and loyalty and responsibility of the public service. And in a second part, I develop a typology of illiberal rule that is a bit more hands-on, probably, and that gives you a differential kind of ability or capacity to assess what's going on, and therefore choose the respective strategies, potential strategies to boost up resilience. So this would be the two kind of tasks that I do today. Don't worry, I have a lot of slides, but I'm not going always into all the details of them. So the first part is this kind of question of history of ideas. And here, of course, the question also for the concern that we have as public administration scholars is we are now, with this rise of illiberalism, as you have discussed in the previous sessions, in a new situation. Before, there was the question was, okay, loyalty, obedience to a democratic government, is in the center. And now the question, if your superiors are illiberals and kind of play with democracy, what do you do, right? What can you do? What should you do? And if you respond, what forms of resistance are legitimate? So these are a kind of a new intensity in this kind of thinking that has never been so clearly put to us, I think, in the last decades. What I want to do now is to make sure or make a bold argument about why we have so big problems with coping with this question from a perspective of the history of administrative ideas. And we are, to an extent that we probably don't even see or reflect a lot anymore, we are in a orthodox kind of mainstream thinking about public administration most of the time. And that's not a bad thing in itself, but it has to be, it's good if we get conscious about it. We are kind of following a Weberian tale of public administration, if you wish. And this Weberian tale has some, let's say, conditions as well that are very specific and that are on the way to generalization and also in teaching often forgotten. So there is an instrumental view. So bureaucracy in Weber's thinking is an instrument, a precision instrument, the only one that really can cope with the rationalization process of modern societies. There is on the same time a kind of a pessimistic view on public administration because this instrument is so efficient and so kind of can be so impressive that it also takes away, think on this metaphor of the iron cage, can take away a lot of freedom from the individual and can also encroach into even politics. So the Weberian kind of nightmare was always to have an administration as strong or so strong that would even kind of get its way in face of in respect to the politicians that should actually be elected in order to control it, right? There is a big, huge control problem that derives to us from the Weberian kind of perspective. If the major problem is control, then you have the following kind of issues here. You have a strict dualism. There is the public administration and the political level. And the public administration should be kept out of any value-based redistributive kind of thinking. There is a strict top-down logic. Yeah? The bureaucracy has to aimed this to Weber, but later on the mainstream, especially in America or American public administration, is based on public choice and economics of bureaucracy, schools. So you conceive bureaucracies or bureaucrats as selfish or potentially selfish individuals, and you have to do something about it, yeah, in terms of principal agent pathologies. So in this kind of thinking that I here can only briefly kind of cover, in this kind of thinking, if this is your way to conceive public administration and bureaucracy, there is obviously no way for active bureaucratic guardianship against any form of backsliding, right? At least not in a social empirical sense. We can speak about constitutions and legal stuff and so on and so forth, but for empirical social science, that's difficult. So therefore, and you have this enshrined actually that is here to show you that this is a kind of a line of great thinkers that you can subsume to this kind of paradigm. So then we have to see, but where else would we go? And in my search, and that you can say now this is a bit random, but in my kind of search for something else or something, other paradigm, I have been getting back to Hegel, and there is some work of public administration scholars that actually kind of advance this in other contexts, but can be, and that's my proposition, this could be kind of applied to our problem. So for Hegel, and I don't want to pretend now be a Hegel kind of scholar here, but let's take this as some propositions. From Hegel, the bureaucracy is not a technocratic machine, but it's more an ethical, interpretive, mediating institution. And what I'm now going to present, like for propositions, we can all talk about them and discuss them, because I'm myself not 100% sure, because I'm at the beginning of this kind of coping with Weber. But you have the bureaucracy as something that institutionalizes practical judgment, like phronesis in our kind of policy talk. So more interpretive application requiring contextual judgment. That is what Hegel obviously have in mind. In contrast to Weber, who sees the bureaucracy as something like instrumental and as a vehicle of instrumental rationality, even performing technical tasks. So this is very different in Hegel. And you have the bureaucrats that are seen as a class. So for us, the class kind of terminology is a bit alien, but let's put it like this, more as something, as a group of people that are, we could interpret it as be committed to the general, to the common good, to something more kind of, a micro foundation that is not just individual kind of utility maximization. You have also the role of the bureaucracy in Hegel that that is more connected to something like a general will, that stabilizes society by actually maintaining these norms and mediating between what is the state at one side and the economic and social sphere on the others. So you have here also a kind of very interesting, different role that Hegel ascribes to the bureaucracy. And therefore you come to something like a bureaucracy is not a instrumental kind of thing, but it's more regulative. It's more like judges. So he sees the bureaucrats work more as judges, and that bring, let's say, the state. And now we would have to get back to the state philosophy of Hegel and the kind of thinking that this kind of institution that is the state, even though it puts duty on individuals, also allows for the best and so the most possible, the maximum on individual freedom at the same time. So this dialectic kind of thinking that has, of course, its own problems, that one should not forget, but it kind of gives us a very different kind of paradigm to which to compare what's going on in public administration. So if you want to kind of systematize this, you can do this, and you come to something without going into details here, but you come to something in according to which there is an ethical calling for the bureaucrats that are working for the state. And therefore there is and Hegel holds the possibility to kind of construct something that would allow for a, let's say, something like a guardianship of the bureaucrats against, in our interpretation now, illiberal rule. I don't want to go much further into the Hegelian bureaucratic kind of conception. The funny thing is that in the organizational side, he's very much like Weber. And there are some authors that say that Weber actually copied a bit from Hegel and didn't attribute this, but this is a different story here. So if you want to see now whether there is some lines of a lineup of scholars that you could connect to such a hetero kind of orthodox position, then you will find them. And you will find them the more the state grows and it becomes a social state. So there is something, I would argue, that a paradigm that is just not as visible as a Weberian paradigm that orients many works in public administration, but because it's not coherently and consistently put in front, we don't identify it. But that is also a proposition we can talk about. I think what's coming out here, and if you want to contrast them, you could, is that you come to these two kind of different concepts of what the bureaucrat's relationship to the state in which she or he works is about. And at the one Weberian kind of side, it's at the end of the day, it's instrumental, and you cannot kind of make a good argument for a kind of a role of opposing any wrongdoings kind of machinery. While in the Hegelian part, I think you can have this, and I think the comparison I do here may be will eventually kind of back this up. And what's coming out of those two things, and that is something we have to work on, I have to work on, is two very kind of different ethos of of bureaucrats. What I present you now is not, you also could find similar things in other works, but I think we can directly kind of put this in this line of thinkers that I just have presented, and that have their origin in Hegel. That would be the thing. You have two ethos. One is the instrumental bureaucratic one, and the other one we could call institutional democratic, as that one would be able to derive from that discussion I just presented. And I think this is important, because only in the second one, only in the institutional democratic one, we can think a bit more systematically about what is actually the form and the response, the resistance that we would allow. And what I offer you here, and I developed this in the other text that is published in Regulation and Governance, is something to think a bit about, what is actually what illiberal governments are doing, and that you see here at the left side. I hope it's also your left side. So they could intoxicate the workplace. They can have illiberal policy change, but they can also weaken the checks and balances and undertake direct power abuses. And I think it's very important to kind of distinguish on similar lines what's going on, because according to these lines, and that would be the argument here, resistance against what's going on should be proportional, right? So if there is direct power abuses, I mean, even counteracting or sabotaging should be allowed somehow, philosophically, because it's kind of playing with the rule of the games. If it's the workplace and reorganization inside, or even illiberal policy change that is legally kind of by parliament confirmed, then there is much less kind of reason or let's say there's less justification for resistance on the side of the bureaucrats. We can discuss this, of course, as well. It has to be discussed, but I think there is a kind of a proportionality in response according to that what's going on, which is, of course, not always easy to see for the bureaucrats that are inside the job. So that was to wrap this up, because this is the philosophical, if you wish, or kind of the more conceptual way of kind of justifying that resistance is possible. And now we go to the other side and we ask ourselves, and I think that is connected. We ask our things, so what do we actually see with illiberal rule going on? So now we go on the side of the perpetrators, if you wish. And I think that is important, because we speak a lot about populism, but populism as a thin kind of thin ideology and more a kind of a mobilization device doesn't really help us to kind of predict what the populists then later on do in government. And populism has been over-researched and so on and so forth. I cut it short here. My proposition is that populism as a kind of terminology doesn't help us anymore so much. But what helps us is if we go more into illiberalism. Illiberalism as a kind of a governing ideology that is anti-pluralistic or anti-institutional. So there is a necessity to differentiate what's going on in the governments. And still, even if we say, and of course we talk about authoritarian populists, we are still kind of not able enough to distinguish. And that's why I kind of push you now here to look at case studies of to look to the examples that we have, and you will find Netanyahu here as well. But I mean, I don't want to comment too much on this. But if you look to Trump, what he's doing, or Musk, or Orban, or somebody like Obrador, Fujimori, Bolsonaro, you will see that in a way they're all kind of illiberal and authoritarian, but they're very different, doing things very differently. Yeah, Trump and Berlusconi and the likes, they overtake administrative control, but they're more interested in loyal rule, and they have something like the ownership of the state. Yeah, and they want to enrich maybe their clan. And the Musk, even though this can go together, obviously for some time, is rather kind of slashing the whole bureaucratic organization itself and substitute it somehow with technological solutions, while Orban or Erdogan are a bit more classic in the sense of authoritarian. They kind of keep the state, they like the state, they repurpose the state for their own kind of rule. While people like Obrador, Bolsonaro, and maybe there is a kind of not a coincidence that this is in Southern America, we see a lot of clientelism and kind of a parallelism. You kind of build parallel structures and just leave the old ones in place, and therefore you hollow out what's going on without really replacing it. I think these are typical kind of strategies of illiberal governments, but you can actually kind of systemize them. If you get, if you distinguish between the vision of the state, or let's say the concept of the state, and the vision of how to control the administration within it, and you kind of put this next to each other, you see that you have an instrumental vision that captures the state. So you like the state, but you want to transform it in your own kind of institution that is run by you. You have something like Orban, and that you can easily call authoritarian. While if you want to substitute the control, you're still instrumental, you still like to work with the state institutions, but you build new ones, then you are more in the neo-clientelistic rule like a la Obrador. No, these are early thinking here, but I'm wondering what you then will tell me about. If you reject the state and you capture it, then you kind of, you reject the state somehow, but you still want to capture it. Then you're in the neo-patrimonial rule like Trump. He seems to own the state. He wants to do business. He wants personal loyalty, and that's just a patrimonial thing. It's in all kind of elements. If you put the normal Max Weber kind of elements of bureaucracy, rational legal, in the rational legal kind of camp, you will see that this is just the opposite. It's just neo-patrimonial. It's patrimonial in almost purity, amazing, anti-procedural, all personal, so it's amazingly patrimonial. While Musk is a different thing, and I would call it neo-reactionary because he destroys what's going there and wants to, you kind of have a technological, even a kind of a digital or whatever kind of fix of the state. He doesn't need a state at all. So you get to these four ideal types, and I don't want to kind of tire you too much with my kind of systematization. I think the interesting for you might be to see that also then, if you for a moment believe in the usefulness of such a distinction, you get very different answers of what are the main problems of these types of illiberal rule. They are actually after different things, and they see the bureaucracy differently, yeah, and therefore also the mechanisms used are different, and I put them here on the slides. So let's just go to neo-authoritarian. So you see you want to replace the bureaucrats maybe, but you just see them as tools still for your kind of ideological thing, and you do this by doing away with hindrance, and best you centralize everything under your kind of control, but you still kind of keep the state institution as it is, and that variation then you see on the other kind of types as well. But then, and I think that is what I really want to show you, which culminates a bit my the second part, is depending on what your illiberal rule is about, also your response in terms of how to boost resilience on the bureaucracies differently. Again, with the neo-authoritarian rule, the Orban, Modi, Erdogans of the world, they centralize, they do away with your kind of institutions. So here you have to constitutionally entrench the oversight bodies. You have to create independence in the system. You have to kind of reinforce the judges, right? You have institutional veto points. This kind of strategy for resilience would not very well work with Musk that does away with everything. But in that sense, in this kind of part of the illiberal spectrum, you probably have here a better structure. Now you will say, but why not do everything? Or the other thing could also work. Yes, that is true. Also, the other kind of resilience strategy might work, and it's not mutually exclusive all the time. It's just a matter also of prioritization, because my understanding would be that you have to focus on the most urgent thing early on. And of course, if we go to empirical works, that we see what's happening under several cycles of illiberal rule, we will see that the things that we think work out work increasingly less out. But that's maybe a different question for this than we have here. So here I put it again, kind of for take away a bit. So what to do here? Neo-patrimonial. You have the best is to insulate your institutions. Neo-reactionary. You have to work with the public, so you need civil society. Neo-authoritarian, horizontal accountability and judicial autonomy are central. And neo-clientelist, you need transparent oversight and merit-based appointments. So you see, I'm pretty much at the meta level maybe, and I hope this is somehow useful. I think what this all culminates in is a bit of something that something that Hannah Arendt also said once, and we can kind of speak about the context of this. I want to put it here because it's the question of obeying, so obedience and loyalty, yes, but no one has the right to obey if it's not kind of, if the government is stepping out of its role itself, then the obedience is not anymore, cannot anymore be requested. And we can go back to the context of Hannah Arendt and when she said this, but this is a bit kind of this what also plays in, I think, in that more general discussion that we have here. And eventually, this is my last slide. I hope it was not too kind of, or you could follow, but you will tell me now. This is a bit, what does this mean for public administration and for what is the task ahead? I think what we need here is a liberal institutionalist theory for public administration. We need to acknowledge trends also in our democratic representative systems, not only in illiberalism, and we have to ask and to also theoretically kind of find new foundations for a public administration and bureaucracy that is has much different tasks that in the Weberian kind of world one could conceive. And we have, or we should go into this direction also because our democracies themselves, and now the challenges are there and culminate in illiberalism and in illiberal rule, but there are also a broader kind of urge to revisit the foundations of our bureaucratic thinking. And I think that is what is the bigger picture that is behind our discussion that we lead today. Of course, I'm in a comfortable position maybe than you, but that is what I want to kind of present to you. Here's the works that are already published on this matter, and 3 of them speak precisely to what we are discussing now. So many thanks for your attention, and I stop sharing so that I can see you.
All right. Wow. Thank you very much. And right on time. Okay. Wow. That was that was a lot to
I'm
take
sorry.
in. I still need to internalize what I just. I was wondering, perhaps before we open it to question, if you could spend perhaps a minute on highlighting the differences between the Trumpian kind of management and the Orban type of
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, this is
bureaucratic oversee.
the yeah, sure, and with pleasure. I mean, if you see what is Trump is doing, and now we have, it's difficult, of course, to distinguish Trump and Musk because the things going on at the same time. But the discussion is a bit that we have here a patrimonial guy, somebody that is not, has nothing to do with procedures. Somebody that wants personal loyalty, and is that doesn't mean that he's doing away with all the state kind of institutions. But if there's resistance, he slashes it. Okay, if it's loyal, he goes with it because he seems not to be interested in this kind of institution, rational kind of bureaucratic kind of state. If it's resistance, it's bad and evil. And at the same time, that goes along, and I want to mention it because I think it's in that case, it's not only in that case that it's important, it's also the deal making. I mean, it's a personal kind of exploitation of the office that is breathtaking for democracies. And also that feature, this is something that Weber kind of showed early on. I mean, this kind of patrimonial rule kind of is prone to is not a legal kind of rational one. We need to make a modern society. So this is Trump that is in the end in that way. And Orban is working with the state, right? Repurposes the state for its own kind of rule, and has no need to do away with it. I mean, he's happy to exploit it, and of course, you can now say, yeah, there's different state understandings, in Europe, communism, and then in the States, and yeah, that's all true as well. But if we want to boil it down to these types of illiberal rule, I think we have some very important distinctions that help us to systematize what's going on in this form, and that could help us to for our own orientation. Maybe not more, but
What
also not less.
what does this mean for the outcome, and what is the goal? Isn't the goal the same for what they're looking for, to consolidate their power, to get what they want from the others? Where I can see the difference in with Musk being the goal being efficiency or government efficiency or something like that, but um,
Yeah, what you put inside the utility of those rules is, of course, I mean, they all want to rule, right? And
yeah.
yeah, maybe Musk, it's a question whether he wants to rule if you want to, but what does this mean if you do away with the state institutions, replace them by some corporate technological fix? Also, somebody rules, right? It's just not anymore, it's not anymore in a collective way the state as we know it. I think there's a little distinction. I mean, they want to keep to power. There is maybe a different intensity of how to exploit on a personal level. I didn't hear anything so far that Orban himself would kind of enrich himself, but his cronies do. So yes, I mean, there is it's more the strategies they use which is in the center of these typologies, because it's the strategy they use for which you want to prepare, right? And that's why this can make sense to an extent, but of course cannot cover everything.
Okay, so thank you very much. These were a few follow-up questions from me. Please raise your virtual hands if you'd like to ask a question. If you can, please open your cameras. You can also raise your physical hands if you're unable to find the right button. Nisim, please go ahead.
Sorry. Again, I'm sorry I'm driving. I was in a conference in Jerusalem. Michael, it was a wonderful presentation. And my question to you, as much as I'm trying to understand the strategies that populists, if we can call it populist government, that are using, and especially in Israel, and this is I can't back it with real facts for now, but my intuition, my feeling is that they're going beyond traditional populism, because I starting to identify strategies that their main goal, their end will be to dismantle, to destroy the state or the institutional state. And do you think that we should adopt a much more critical, although we are critical,
we lost.
Mhm.
Can you repeat the last sentence? We lost you.
Yes. My question to you, Professor Bauer, is there a possibility that we are not looking at populism in the right amount of criticism that we should look at this phenomenon? Because part of the strategies, more and more strategies, especially in Israel, are seems not as a populism, but a real effort to destroy the democratic state, to dismantle the democratic state, to break the institutional democratic state. And perhaps we should go to other sources, to other literature, even to literature that people who promote fascism or promote dictator, to understand how they thinking and what are their goals. So this is my question to you again, and I'm sorry that I'm driving.
No, it's. Do you want to collect, or can I answer?
Just go ahead and answer. For now, we.
Yeah, Nissim, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think the populism, of course, there's nothing wrong about the populism. It's from the concept and everything. It just doesn't help us once the populists are in government, right? It doesn't help us so much, because it's maybe at the end of the day more a kind of mobilization strategy in the electoral sense. And also democracy has a liberal but also majoritarian kind of component. And this has to be balanced out, and there's always a tension. So populism in this sense, each parties are to some extent, I guess, populist and have to be. So the populism purely conceived doesn't help us to understand the phenomenon that are there. On the other side, so that's why I agree, and I say we have to kind of go to other kind of literatures, and maybe this the illiberal component that goes, of course, well to some extent with populism is the one that can analytically kind of bring us further. And somehow I try to use this in this typology, right? So that's fine. On the other hand, I think what you also kind of hinted to was that there might be also real problems that are not solved by democracy, that kind of invite this dissatisfaction with the system, that can then be exploited, and that pushes people to support it. And that kind of problem is not touched at all in these debates. And so we have, in all what we are doing and analyzing at that level at least, we have this problem that we may eventually kind of doctor the symptoms and not the causes. But this is a discussion that is very, very difficult to lead, and one has to concentrate and to be analytic about it. So that's very, very difficult. And then, if you allow me, I cannot comment on Israel a lot because I don't know it too well. So you have here, and also in the other kind of, if I could even say Trump. So I don't want to comment on Israel because I know too little and you are all expert. If I look at Trump, eventually he will destroy, of course, the state. If you ask me, is it his intention to destroy the state? I'd say probably not, because this guy doesn't know what to do, right? But eventually the kind of outcome will be this destruction of the institutions of due process and everything else. And then we open the thing to an autocratic kind of regime for the next decades, right? That's the danger. And yes, so at the one hand, we have our little academic kind of turfs, and on the other hand, there are big kind of things going on, and that doesn't match. So if you allow me this a bit kind of pessimistic kind of thinking.
All right. Thank you. Do we have more questions, comments? Nadav, for you? Yeah? Okay. Go ahead.
So thank you for a fascinating presentation. It raises so many questions. I'd like to start on the most basic level and ask you if you about if we conceive of state apparatus of the public service as rational, according to the rational model, and we and it's under populist, autocratic, illiberal rulers. So can it, even in terms of means to an end, can it work rationally when it doesn't, or it's the ruler, it's both demands the organization not to work according to facts, according to professional standards, and not like be committed to the truth, to the law. So if, for example, the ISA, the Shabak, has to produce intelligence, to conduct investigations and inquiries, can it really do that rationally if it's not allowed to work according to facts, according to professional standards, but according to personal interests or loyalties? In your analysis?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I share the concern, of course. Eventually, I mean, if we leave the bureaucrats or the government employees to alone individually, then we kind of put a lot on their shoulders, right? So it's very easy to leave them alone somehow, right? And that's why we talk about ethics and ethos in the public sector, I think. And that's a bit, I hope, my contribution of today, just to make you think you may be more as civil servants, more powerful, and also there's a greater need to consider whether you do the right thing, also kind of based on thinking of public administration and populists and illiberals in government. I think that's a bit the exercise to make this conscient, to make us conscient that there cannot be just obedience and loyalty if you have a role as, or no, you, I don't know, but if you're a civil servant, a government employee, you have a role to play. And everybody knows that, and the civil servants are usually wonderful in democratic states, at least, to kind of fulfill it. And they know it, and they do it to their best. And they are loyal. However, the government, and that's the message here, has also a role to play and has only power as much as the constitution and the rules allow. And if the government oversteps it, then I think then is the point where the loyalty or obedience and of the civil servant stops. And I think that we have to make more conscient. And I think the Weberian kind of rational concept is a diagnosis that doesn't help us here. So we need a normative kind of benchmark. And that's why I'm looking for this other paradigm to bring it in to help us to cope with this tension.
Thank you very much. Do we have more questions from the audience, or if I understood correctly, you are drawing parallels or creating a linkage between the strategy or the goal of the political of politicians, of political leadership, and the acts or intensity, right, of the resistance. I was wondering if you can say something. I understand it's kind of a philosophical construction. So I'd be interested in understanding this a bit more. If you think that the resistance is dependent on the style, on the strategy, or on understanding the overall objective of where this is going.
Yeah, I think it is. I think there is an intensity of trespassing or kind of overshooting, dismantling from the government, and accordingly there is also the, let's say, the, you know, Hannah Arendt would say there's also a duty then to kind of resist. Yeah, since I'm German, and we have to open a big kind of discussion what this means for each individual. I'm a bit hesitant here, but yes, this kind of proportionality is important. You know, there is a lot of empirical accounts of populists, and now I say also populists, but call them illiberals in government that make the life of civil servants hell, right? Workplace intimidation. Gabriela Lotta worked on this a lot, and I saw some papers. Probably Nissim also was working on this. Yeah. So what do they do with us in the civil service? And then of course, there is this, okay, there's workplace intimidation and so on and so forth. But one has also to say that the prerogative of a government that is democratically elected is to do what they want in the first place, you know, not beyond the law, but kind of they can do a lot with reorganization and with kind of playing with the civil service. The greater society is probably not so concerned. So I don't want to minimize this. I just want to say there is a difference between, you know, if you're elected, you can reorganize and redo your civil service. Okay. You can also formally and legally kind of adopt illiberal policies, you know, to a certain extent. If this is not unconstitutional outright, you can say, okay, we don't want to teach anymore this and that. I have my problems with this, don't get me wrong, but there are democratic kind of majoritarian reasons to kind of say they can do this. And then there is maybe a legal review and so on and so forth. So in these two categories, resistance is maybe more on the side of a, you know, you withdraw or you exit or you remain passive. You don't want to be part of this. In the other categories that I presented, that was kind of if they start playing with the system and weaken the controls, and if they even do direct abuses and go against the law, I think there starts the duty to resist. Yeah, this you cannot kind of obey and say, yeah, I'm just a civil servant, I cannot do anything. They are in power, because there kicks in clearly what Hannah Arendt just meant with, you know, there is no right to obey if you really know it's the wrong thing. So now this is a philosophical thing, and we know that at the point of breaking the constitution, who can be sure that the constitution is broken? We always wait for the judges and so on and so forth. But maybe here lies the kind of consciousness that we have to infuse into civil servants to reinterpret their role a bit, not as an instrument only, as a machinery, but also as a collective kind of class of people that have the good of the society in mind. And I know that this is a difficult discussion, given the totalitarian claims that have been made if you start thinking in these kind of terms of institutions. But on the other side, if our systems are disintegrated deliberately in the other paradigms, I think it's time to start looking for at least and trying out what academic discussion has to offer to entertain a different solution or different kind of debate on those issues.
All right. Thank you very much for that. So go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for the lecture. Regarding resistance, I think there is this danger of a loop in which signs of resistance are interpreted by illiberal governments as reinforcing their prejudices regarding the bureaucracy. And therefore, I would imagine, and I think we have evidence that this is the case, that many bureaucracies will attempt to choose their battles and obviously run the risk that when you actually do choose your battle, it's too little too late or not on the right issue. How would you negotiate this complex decision-making process of when to resist, when not to, when is it too late, when is it too early?
Absolutely true. And we see there's this book from Kuchinskas, Jamie Lee Kuchinskas. I can make some advertisement here. I don't know whether Jamie's around, but that looks into this kind of resistance under Trump and finds very little, and precisely kind of on the lines that you kind of outlined. So you're an expert, you kind of you're a consultant somehow. You say what is the best and you repeat what is better, and you know that if you don't kind of come through, if you don't get through to the politicians at a certain point, you just say, okay, then I go into inner emigration and I don't participate anymore. I do my job and let it go, or you resign, and these kind of things. But it's also a kind of a resistance, right? So it's this kind of proportionality, and you see this a lot. And I would never ask from people to go. I mean, I'm the last one to go to the streets and to be activist. Yeah, I'm super introverted, boring academic. Yeah, but of course, I'm probably very close to the mindset of an administrator myself. So I completely see what your argument is, and there is a dilemma. I can just repeat that if we train our staff ethically, ethos, on the basis of a Weberian kind of thing, thinking, then you entertain this. If you do, and now I'm exaggerating because it's not done like this, right? I mean, there's ethical education that is more complex than this, but just to make it simplified, if you kind of run it by machinery, instrumental type of kind of considerations, you will not get this conscious. I think there is this other kind of side of the story that is not yet there, but that has the potential to at least kind of mobilize in such situations more resistance. And since we are confronted with such governments de facto, I mean, it's time to go into this direction. But this is a normative debate. I find myself, and that's the funny thing, if you allow me to say this in all modesty, I'm this kind of super boring empirical kind of researcher that only by seeing what's going on under Trump and Orban has been pushed into a normative kind of a line of thinking. I'm the last one I've never imagined myself to embark on those debates, but precisely because we are under a different regime now somehow. We cannot kind of neglect anymore these kind of normative questions that we have somehow bracketed. They were there. People have discussed this. Waldo, others have discussed the democratic dimension, but we have neglected it. And that is the mainstream kind of public administration kind of fallacy, if you wish, the sin, given that what we see now, then that we have to correct. And that's very normative. I hate to be normative, guys. I mean, this is terrible. I hate to be normative. I've never imagined to be normative. And I'm not normative in that sense. I'm just offering you a different kind of reference point, and I work on this reference point, and I don't force you to take it on. I just say it's existing and you can use it, and maybe it's a different scope condition, and then you can kind of course put it in your own work or in your own teaching or in your own kind of consideration or not.
Okay, and this is about the time that we have, and I think it's a good point to stop here, and also the mission of academia and the importance of academic research, and in also intervening in these important debates, and first identifying them and then intervening in them. So thank you very much, Professor Bauer, for this really thought-provoking talk. Would you like to?
If I can just say at the end, it was my pleasure. I know I did too much. It was too dense a presentation. Forgive me. I was too eager to kind of see your reactions, and so forgive me that. A bit of Hebrews maybe on my side, but I'm there. So you know me. I'm in Florence. There's an email, so everybody, and with Nissim. We have spoken in the past, and you know, this is a conversation that we have to lead, and I invite you to mail me if there's something that is of interest to you or some conversation you would like to lead. And I hope I see you around in conferences and stuff. And it's my first exposure to intelligence, so I'm also wish you all the best, really, for your work and what's going on. So
Thank
thank
you
you
very
so
much.
much for having me. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for the
Thank
confidence
you.
in us. I would just like to say before everyone leave that I would kindly ask to the members of our forum to stay a little longer so we can have our own reflection on the series. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Let's
Goodbye.
take
Thank you.
a few seconds just to make sure that
Goodbye.
bye bye. Thank you. חברי פילם, נעצור את ההקלטה.